For purposes of this interview, could you please state your name and what town you live in?
Bill Cornell. I live in Bridgeport in 3030 Park Avenue, a high-rise senior living place.
All right. For the first question, what did you enjoy to do while you grew up for hobbies?
Growing up? I always liked the water. Lived on a river, on the Delaware River, and spent a lot of time on the water.
All right. So you grew up in Pennsylvania, correct?
No, I was born in Pennsylvania,
All right.
and when I was about 6 months old, my parents moved to New Jersey, to a little town on the Delaware River called Belvedere, and I would live there until I got through high school.
Okay. What was it like growing up in Belvedere, New Jersey in general?
Belvedere was a wonderful little town. It only about 2,500 people in the town, so it was a country town.
Mm-hmm. During your school days when you were growing up, did you do any extracurricular activities or involved in during after-school activities?
I'm afraid I did too much in extracurricular stuff. I was active in sports, active in whatever was going on. If it's a play, I was in the play, and I was an officer in my class. Well, we didn't have officers till I was a junior, but I was treasurer of my class, and then as a senior, I was president of my class.
Oh, really? Okay.
So I was very active.
Could you describe to us how being a Boy Scout and an Eagle Scout kind of formed your future and your way into becoming, into going into the military?
You know, my dad was on the committee for our Troop 41 in Belvedere, and he took me to a scout meeting once when I was 8 years old, and I never missed a meeting from that time on. I couldn't be a scout until I was 12. I don't know what it is now, but you had to be 12. And I was in it very active, working on merit badges and also activities of the troop. I was always doing something. I was scribe of the troop. True.
All right. This is kind of like a similar question. Sorry about that. How did your upbringing influence your decision to enlist, or were you drafted?
Influenced me to do what?
To like enlist, or were you drafted into the war?
Oh, no, I wasn't drafted, but I had a very low number, and I knew I was going to be drafted. So, living in Scranton, Pennsylvania, the 28th Division, Infantry Division, was going to be federalized in February 1941. And so instead of waiting to be drafted, I got a way to join the infantry, the 109th Infantry, before it was federalized.
Okay. You said you had a very low number. Can you explain to that and the camera, obviously, what that means?
Well, everybody had a number, and I don't know how the number was just assigned to us, and I don't know how they did it. I'm sure they picked numbers out of a hat or something like that.
All right, and kind of, I guess, yeah, merging into into from your childhood to your time serving. How did your family react when you told them that you were going to serve in the military?
Well, they knew that I was going to have to go anyway, and so going with the 109th, I knew a few people in it, and she figured, well, I'm going with my friends.
Yeah, all right. Can you describe to us what boot camp or early training was like?
Service, in service?
Like before, like your training?
Well, I was late getting in, so was the only opening to put me was in a medical detachment, and that didn't. I didn't think that that's what I wanted. I wanted to get into something else other than medical. And so I think it was the second week that we were in Indiantown Gap, where there were people were assigned to projects temporarily for a matter of days. Well, they sent me into the supply section where we broke down food. We had 19 kitchens in the regiment, and we would break down the food and then distribute it to all the different kitchens. Well, the old fellow who ran it, he was a master sergeant, and he was a World War I guy. He simply took whatever, there was 1,000 pounds of meat, he divided it by 19, and that's what every kitchen got. And I said to him, why is one kitchen who with the strength of double another kitchen, why do they get the same thing? He said, well, how would you do it? I said, well, with a little bit of math. He says, you do it. So I got myself a job of breaking down all the food, whatever it was. And then as a result of that, they decided that I was helping that much. You shouldn't be in medical detachment. You ought to be in service company. So I went to service company. And before you knew it, Major Siemens, who was the S4, he in charge of supply in the regiment, knew what I was doing. He said, I'd like you to come up and work for me in headquarters, and that would be all kinds of supplies. And I did. And we had a table of basic needs. And he said, look this over and see if you can make any heads or tails of it. And I did. Before you knew it, I could see, well, we should be getting toothbrushes. We should be getting soap. We should be getting any number of things, you know. Before you knew it, the supply section was so darn busy, they didn't know what to do. They hardly could handle it over. But anyway, long story short, I was in supply S4, and they gave me 3 stripes. Well, first I got a specialist rating, and that gave me $20 a month over my regular $21 a month. But then I got the 3 stripes, and I kept working in the same thing, and before I knew it, I was a staff sergeant, and then I got master. And master is the best you can do. Right up there, that, see those 6 stripes?
Yep.
That's the best rank in the Army, because you ran your own section. I had officers that were my bosses, but they didn't bother me at all. Just go and do what you're doing.
Hmm. Okay, so you said you were in the Air Force and the infantry?
Well, yeah, I was in the infantry for 2 years, and the 109th was had a lot of pressure on everybody to go to OCS if they thought you were qualified, and I didn't feel that I wanted to be an infantry officer. So the fellow who was working for me was going to the Air Force, Air Corps in those days. So he went, and when he left, a week or two later, something hit me, and I said, I ought to be going too.
You said the OES or OCS? What is that?
Well, it was Air Force OCS. We were cadets, and we lived like cadets in West Point, and we had the upperclassmen, the underclassmen, and it was fun, but it was tough. We had that was in the pre-flight.
Mm-hmm. What were the living conditions for when you served? What were they like? Rough, good, mixture of both, horrible, great?
In service, you mean?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, that's fine. We had barracks that had heat in them. And of course, we were there in the wintertime, and it was cold, very cold. Matter of fact, the day that we arrived at Indiantown Gap, after traveling on a troop train all day, we got to these barracks, and there was no heat in them yet. And so it was a week before we got heat. But they had issued me an overcoat that didn't fit me. It was much too big for me. So that became my mattress. And it was a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before we got mattresses.
How did your expectations going into war compare to your experience of the war?
Sorry, I don't understand you.
Before you went into the war, how did your expectations going into war compare to your experience in war?
Well, the company I was working for at that time said, we got a job for you when you come out. So that's what I look forward to. I don't know what else to say.
Okay. Could you describe to us your happiest moment during the war?
I guess when it was over with.
And following on that note, could you describe to us your scariest moment of the war?
My what?
Your scariest and most intense, I guess you would say, part of the war, like memory.
Big memories? Huh. No, I enjoy being in service.
Okay.
It was really good. Of course, having a good job in the infantry, that helped a lot. And then leaving there, going to the Air Force, and I had asked to be in training for navigator, but they said, no, you have to be a pilot. Okay, so I'm a pilot. And really, that was hard, but it was fun.
You flew a B-12?
Enjoyed it an awful lot.
Oh yeah, that's good.
I still love to fly.
When's the last time you flew? When's the last time you flew?
Well, handling controls, about 5 years, 6 years. I took you up.
Must have been little.
I took all the kids up,
Really?
all the grandchildren.
I must have been little.
Yeah, you were.
Could you describe to us the relationships you made while you were serving with other people that were also serving?
Um, it was no different than service, uh, working with your coworkers. Although we always had an officer who a lot of people feared, but if you do your job, do your best, and work, there's no problem. It's it's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm. Uh, when you think back on war now, what could you describe to us your most vivid memory or story that you have?
In service?
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. No, I can't.
Okay. Uh, how did you stay in contact with like your loved ones, your family, Grandma Joe?
Well, telephone was very rare because it was expensive. But I called my folks once in a while. But I wrote almost every day to my mother and dad, and they wrote to me every day. So there was a lot of mail back and forth.
If you could go back in time, knowing then what you know now, would you change anything? And if so, what would you change about your whole experience?
No, I think everything I did, it was fine. I got along fine.
Mm-hmm. When you came back from the service and you were just adjusting to your everyday life again, was it hard? Like, I guess adjusting to civilian life, I guess you could say.
Well, yeah, it was hard. Because I didn't say before, but I got married.
Yeah, kind of.
And I can't remember exactly when it was, and so, well, yeah, I got married in 1944, and at that time I was flying at Harlingen Air Force Base in Texas, and we lived there for until I was transferred to Laredo, and up until that time I'd been flying B-24s, and then when I got to Laredo I was flying B-29s, and that's the plane that dropped the bomb, the big bomb, you know.
Yeah.
And we got married in September 44, and in September 45 our son Jeff came along. So before I got home, I was in until December 15th or something like that. And Jeff had been born in September. So I hadn't seen him until then.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that was a big change in my life.
Yeah.
But
I'd say so.
a good change.
Yeah. What did you miss most about home when you were in the military?
Probably the good food.
Good food.
Living with my mother and dad. My mother was a good cook, and even I was working in a lumber yard, and working.
Ring Bend?
Yeah, that's when I started in the lumber business
Mhm.
before the war.
What year? Do you know what year?
Well, I started in the 1937, I think it was. So I had 3 years in lumber business before I went in service, and all of that work before the war was pretty much outdoors, driving truck and unloading freight cars, and all the hard work that goes with a lumber yard.
Hmm. Uh, do you miss anything about the military, and if so, what do you miss?
In my life.
No, like when you were serving, was it?
Oh,
Is there anything you miss now that you?
no, I can't say so.
Right.
That was a part of my life, and a good part of my life.
Hmm. From your time in, sorry, from your time in the military, what was your proudest achievement or moment?
Proudest? Oh, I don't know. I guess probably making master sergeants.
6 stripes. All right. Um, what do you think would have happened if you didn't join the military? Do you think you would have got drafted?
Oh yeah, I would have been drafted, and then I wouldn't know where I was going to go, and I would have no choice. But I had a choice in doing what I did.
Mm-hmm. Uh, sorry, some technical mishaps. Uh-oh. Okay, okay, we're good. Uh, how did serving for our country affect your later life? Like being a veteran.
I have greatest respect for veterans and the things that they've done, and I'll support them always. And I have tremendous respect for the flag. And when I lived at Lally Boulevard, and I had a flagpole outside, I put that flag up every morning, took it down every night.
Okay.
And I miss doing that, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm. How? What were your feelings? Could you describe to us your feelings when you were told the war had ended, or that you were being relieved of your duties?
Well, there was a certain feeling of relief, but then the next day, they said B-29s were grounded, and then I worried about how I'm going to get my flight time in.
Mhm. uh, hmm. Could you describe to us your most important lesson that you learned while you were in the military, like a life motto, I guess you could say, or certain lessons?
Oh, boy. Just respect, I guess, and pride of your country, and
Mm-hmm. What experiences has being a veteran brought you?
yeah, I can't say it's brought me.
Like any certain?
It's just an overall part of your life, and it was 5 years out of my business life, which I regretted, but in other ways it made up for it, and I think you guys and anybody should have a year of service when you get out of high school.
All right. Say if one of us wanted to join the military, what advice would you give us? Kind of following on that note.
Well, decide what kind of a life you want to have in the military. But you'll have a chance to make up your mind what you'd like to do after you've had basic training, and that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you in touch with any of the people you met or any friends you had during your service?
No, I'm afraid that at 100, all the rest of them are dead.
uh, hmm. Coming home, your experiences in general, how has war kind of changed you as a person?
I don't know how I can answer that. I can't say they've changed me at all.
Mm-hmm. Um, hmm. Could you describe to us how you pretty much ended up in Fairfield, Connecticut after?
Well, I told you I was married when I was in service, and my wife was, I met her in Harlingen, Texas, but she was born in Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Uh-huh.
So most people go where the man has his business, but I came with her to Bridgeport and didn't have a job. I quit my job I was with, who I thought I had a career with, and I came down here and we started all over, right from the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Kind of starting to wrap things up. Is there any pictures or items or like uniforms, say, or anything that you would like to show us in the camera? I'm gonna.
I don't know. There's.
Do you want me to grab something?
Yeah. That's when I was in the infantry.
Were these some of your infantry buddies, I guess you could say?
Yeah, they are also master sergeants.
Master
There's four of them
sergeants.
in the company,
Wow.
and they're the four.
Is that a one of the B-24s that you flew?
Yeah, that's too small, I think, to see anything. But this was a B-24.
A B-24. All right.
And there's the B-29.
The B-29, which you started flying after you learned how to fly the B-24, correct?
Yeah, I flew the B-24 mostly, but I probably only have 100 hours in a B-29, so not very much.
Okay. And kind of for people that don't know watching, you said the B-21 was the one that dropped the bomb?
That was a B-29.
Okay, could you explain to the camera and everyone what that means?
What it means? Oh, sure, that's really what ended the war in the Pacific. It was going to be a very terrible war, but Harry Truman became president, and they had the bomb already, not nuclear, atom bomb, and he gave the Japanese a warning that he was going to drop the bomb if they didn't give up, and they didn't. So he dropped the bomb. The next day, Tito called it quits. That was the end of it.
Okay.
Otherwise, there would have been a bloody, bloody war going invading Japan, and that was the B-29 did it.
All right. Well, I think that basically wraps up our interview, and I would like to thank you for your time and your service.
Okay.
Yeah.